Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are going to talk about one of my favorite baits of all time. It's also some people's least favorite bait of all time, but if you watch today's video, you're going to learn a lot about it. It's going to help you catch more fish in no time, and that's going to be the Wacky rig. We're going to talk about 3 tips to help you catch more fish on a Wacky rig all summer long, spring and fall as well, but this is my bread and butter throughout the summer, especially on lakes like what we're on right here with docks all over the lake. So we're going to go talk about rod and reel setup. We're going to talk about the couple tips to help you catch more fish, and then we're actually going to go out on the water. We're going to show you my favorite tip of all time, throwing a Wacky rig that will have you catching more fish in no time. So stay tuned, let's get right into it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is rod and reel setup. This isn't as important with a Wacky rig, but I do want to run through it. This is a custom built rod that I build myself. This is a 7-foot medium action spinning rod with a fast tip. I like that fast tip to be able to skip it well around these docks, and then it has a little bit of backbone to be able to set the hook and pull those fish out. You will lose some fish doing this ultimately because you're skipping around metal docks with light line. It's just going to happen. But if you tie on a 10-pound leader instead of an 8-pound leader, sometimes I go to 8 if the water's really clear. That 10-pound leader will allow you to get a little bit more abrasion resistance and sometimes land more fish. And then I have a 10-pound lime green braided line. This is going to be tip number 1 right here. You want to use the lime green braid. On a day like today, it's not really going to make a difference. Sometimes it will, but if you have a little bit of wind, it might not do it as much. What this braid is going to do when you skip your bait under these docks, you can watch the line to be able to tell exactly what your bait is doing. So when you skip it under there, you'll see the line going out slowly, and you know that your bait is sinking under the dock. Sometimes what will happen is you'll see the line literally jump. That is from the vacuum effect of these fish sucking your Wacky rig in. You know that you have a fish on, you can reel up your slack tight and get a good hook set and get these fish coming to you before they wrap you up underneath the dock. The other thing that it'll do is you can watch it and see if your line's gonna go left or right, and if a fish picks it up and is swimming a different direction with it. Ultimately, it's going to allow you to get a bunch more hook sets, better hook sets, and land more fish because you're gonna know you're gonna get more bites. Like I said, on a day like today when it's very windy, might not help you as much because the wind might blow the line around a little bit, but I still watch it anyway. I try my best to do it, and it'll help you land more fish throughout the day. The other thing that's gonna help you land more fish throughout the day is going to be your hook selection. This is the biggest thing that I've learned over the few years of Wacky rig fishing. I've kind of dialed this pattern in a little bit and this technique. The hook that I always used was like a Gamakatsu Wacky hook, the little O octopus shaped hook. It's a very short shank, but it has a wide gap, and I always lost fish on it. I could never figure out why. I'd lose like 4 out of 10 fish that I would hook, and I could not figure out why. The gap on the hook, the length of the shank, is not long enough to get behind the jawbone on a big bass mouth. So when you set the hook on them, you're actually just skin hooking them or getting their lip, and as you put pressure on these fish pulling them out of the dock, it will just naturally rip a hole in their mouth and then they'll end up coming off. So what I'd switch to is a VMC weedless Nico hook. You can also throw it just in the regular if you're not fishing around cover, but fishing around docks, the weedless Nico hook is excellent to be able to hook these fish and get them out properly. I use a size 2 or a 1 is usually where I like to go there. The biggest thing with this is to make sure that it has that long enough shank. So the size 2 and the 1 is what it's the best size there. And because of that, you're gonna have that longer shank. It's gonna get back behind the fish's mouth. You're gonna get a good hook set on them. Make sure you can get those fish out and not worry about the hook coming out while you're putting pressure on them to pull their face out of the dock so that they can't wrap you up in any pulls. So with that being said, let's head out on the water. We're gonna talk about a couple other tips, what I'm looking for around these docks, how I like to fish this bait, and some very, very key areas to give you a much larger chance of getting bites on this bait to begin with fishing around these docks. So now that we talked about the Wacky rig setup, everything you need to know to land more fish when you're fishing around these docks, we're gonna actually fish a couple docks right here. So right here in front of me, we have this dock. You can see there's a bunch of area for these fish that they could actually live. There's a boat here, there's tons of pilings under there, and then there's this pontoon boat. Ideally, my #1 tip when I'm fishing these docks, you can't skip the whole dock, don't skip anything. Make sure you fish the entire dock thoroughly, but the #1 key area is going to be right under that pontoon boat right there. You can see pontoons on each side and then the motor. All I'm gonna do is skip my Wacky rig right under the boat just like that. and then I'm just gonna let it sit there. And the biggest thing on these grass lakes is what's underneath these pontoon boats is what actually is going to draw these fish in. So when I'm skipping around these docks, there's plenty of area to skip on the dock, and you'd think there's tons of cover, but what's under the water is what matters, and there's grass under these docks. The pontoon boat offers the most amount of shade around the entire dock, and because of that, there will be holes in the grass where it cannot grow, and because of that, all the bass will congregate underneath on that hole, wait for bait to come out inside that hole and ambush it, and that's what your Wacky rig's gonna do. It's gonna fall right in there, imitate that bait falling in that hole, or a bluegill coming out, and you're gonna catch a fish. Where if you skip it on some other portion of the dock where there's more grass, if there's no shade, the grass can actually grow there. So the grass needs sun to grow. So if it's growing under that dock and you throw it, all that's gonna happen is your Wacky rig is gonna lay on that grass, not do anything for you. Where if you can get it under one of those pontoon boats, there's the hole in the grass, and that hole, your bait will actually make it down to the bottom. There's bass waiting on each side of the hole or any sides of the hole, and they'll just be waiting for a bait to come out, and that's when they'll get it. So we're gonna skip this pontoon boat up here. Hopefully we'll get a bite. So again, we have a pontoon boat here. This is what we're gonna be looking for. There's gonna be holes in the grass underneath. All I'm gonna do is take this Wacky rig, and we're gonna go ahead and skip it right up underneath this pontoon. So I throw it as far under there as I can get it. My bait is all the way back there. All I'm gonna do is let it sit. You don't wanna move the bait, you don't need to work it. It's gonna do the work for you. And if you can look, there's actually grass all around the dock here that you can see. It's growing up to the surface. There's grass everywhere. There's no way that your Wacky rig could make it down through that grass. But if you land it in that hole there, and we got one. Not a big one by any means, but you can see I literally landed it in that hole in that pontoon boat, and it ambushed it as soon as it hit the water. And also what I did, I was using that line. You can see that fish got hooked all the way back here in the mouth. So that was way behind his jawbone. He was staying on the whole way back. That's what that Nico hook will do. And as I was talking to you guys, I watched my line jump and take off underneath that boat. So I knew that he had picked that bait up and took it. Like I said, not a big one, very easily could have been. That's the technique, that's gonna land you more fish. And that is my favorite way to fish a Wacky rig in the summertime. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video talking about the Wacky rig, and it'll help you catch more fish throughout your fishing, skipping docks with the Wacky rig. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and check this video out here. Some other tips on a Wacky rig as well. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, and thanks for watching.